A Picture Book of Frederick Douglass by David A. Adler. Frederick Douglass was born a slave on a tobacco, corn, and wheat farm in Talbot County, Maryland. He was born in February 1818. His mother named him Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. Frederick's mother was an African-American slave named Harriet Bailey. He never knew who his father was, but he did know that he was a white man. Some people said he was Captain Aaron Anthony, Frederick's first owner. When Frederick was 6, he was taken to his master's house and put to work. He wrote later about how he lived as a slave. In the hottest summer and coldest winter, I was kept almost naked. No shoes, no stockings, no jacket, no trousers, nothing on but a coarse tow linen shirt reaching only to my knees. He was fed boiled corn meal called mush. Frederick was wakened often by the cries of a slave being beaten. The first time that happened, it was his own Aunt Esther, who was tied to a hook and whipped. Young Frederick was so frightened that he ran into a closet and hid. When Frederick was 8 years old, he was taken to Baltimore to live as a slave of Sophia and Hugh Auld, relatives of his master's daughter. He ran errands for the Aulds and took care of their infant son, Thomas. Young Frederick Bailey was Sophia Auld's first slave. She was a good-hearted woman and taught Frederick the alphabet. She began to teach him to read until her husband told her it was against the law. Hugh Auld said a slave should know nothing but to obey his master. Sophia Auld stopped teaching Frederick, but he didn't stop learning. He took a book with him when he went out on errands. Poor white boys he met in the street helped him learn to read. When Frederick was about 12, he told the boys, "I am a slave for life," and he asked them, "Have not I as good a right to be free as you have?" Frederick read the Bible and went to a church Sabbath school for black children. When he was 14, he taught at the school. In 1833, Frederick was sent to work for Thomas Auld, Hugh's brother. The next year, he was sent to work for Edward Covey, a poor farmer known to break the spirit of young slaves. Frederick worked hard. Even so, Covey beat him about once a week. Then, one summer morning, Frederick fought back. Covey never beat him again. The fight was a turning point in Frederick's life as a slave. "I was nothing before," he said later. "I was a man now." On January 1st, 1835, Frederick was sent to work for William Freeland. On Sundays, the slaves had no work, and Frederick opened a secret Sabbath school and taught slaves to read. Frederick longed to be free. He and a few other slaves hoped to escape by boat, but someone told of their plans, and Frederick was put in jail. He expected to be sold to a slave owner in the Deep South, to work in the cotton fields, a fate Frederick thought of as a life of living death, but instead he was sent back to Baltimore to be Hugh Auld's slave again. Frederick worked in a shipyard. Whatever he earned, he gave to Hugh Auld. In Baltimore, Frederick met with many free African Americans, including Anna Murray. Together, they planned Frederick's escape from slavery. Frederick planned to travel north by train. Anna gave him the money he needed. A free African-American sailor loaned Frederick papers to prove he was not a slave. Frederick rode 3 trains, 3 ferries, and a steamboat to New York City and Freedom. Then, to make it difficult for slave catchers to find him, he changed his surname from Bailey to Johnson and then to Douglass. Soon after Frederick arrived in New York, he sent for Anna Murray. They were married on September 15, 1838, and moved further north to New Bedford, Massachusetts. Frederick and Anna Douglass had 5 children: Rosetta, Louis, Frederick Jr., Charles, and Anna. About 4 months after he came to New Bedford, Frederick began reading The Liberator, an anti-slavery newspaper. He wrote later, "My soul was set all on fire." In 1841, Frederick Douglass met the editor of the newspaper, William Lloyd Garrison. Garrison hired him to travel to other cities, talk about the horrors of slavery, and sell subscriptions to The Liberator. In 1845, his autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, was published. In the book, he wrote his original name, Frederick Bailey, and the name of his master. This put Frederick in danger of being caught as a runaway slave. So he went to England. He gave speeches there, too, about the evils of slavery. Frederick Douglass believed that people are not property to be owned by others, but still, in Baltimore, the Aulds held papers proving that they did own him. Some friends in England bought those papers and his freedom. Now he could go home. Frederick Douglass returned to the United States in 1847. He moved to Rochester, New York, and started his own anti-slavery newspaper, the North Star. Later it was renamed Frederick Douglass Paper. Frederick spoke out against the racial prejudice he found in the northern states. He spoke out for women's rights. His house became a stop on the Underground Railroad, a series of safe houses for runaway slaves on their way further north to freedom. On April 12, 1861, the 4-year-long Civil War between the Northern Union Army and the Southern Confederate Army began. It was the war that ended slavery in the United States. 8 months after the Confederate Army was defeated, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution was passed. Slavery was outlawed. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln was re-elected president. In March 1865, after the inauguration, Frederick Douglass went to the White House to shake the president's hand. At first, he was not allowed in because he was African American. President Lincoln had him shown in, and as he entered the hall, the president said, "Here comes my friend Douglass." Several weeks later, on April 14th, President Lincoln was shot. He died the next day. Frederick Douglass wrote 2 more books about his life: My Bondage and My Freedom, published in 1855, and The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, published in 1881. In 1877, he was named Marshal, and in 1881, Recorder of Deeds for Washington, D.C. In 1889, he was named Consul General to Haiti. In 1882, Anna Douglass died. 2 years later, Frederick married Helen Pitts, a white woman. Both blacks and whites were upset by the marriage. Helen Pitts told people that she had married the man she loved. Frederick Douglass told people that his first wife was black like his mother, his second wife was white like his father. During his last years, Frederick Douglass spoke out against the mob violence and lynching of African Americans in the South. He wrote that every Southern breeze was tainted and freighted with Negro blood. Frederick Douglass had helped lead the struggle to end slavery. He had hoped to see blacks and whites throughout the United States living together in peace. He never did. On February 20th, 1895, after attending a meeting on the women's rights, Frederick had a heart attack and died. He was 77 years old.